As mentioned Friday at the end of class, I would like for you to review the timeline that you can find on Dipity prior to coming to class on Monday. To make it easier, I'm going to show you how to access Dipity. First, you're going to want to open Internet Explorer and log into your email account. There you'll find an email that I sent to you on Friday with a subject Weebly link. You're going to want to go ahead and click on that email and then find the one link that I attached to it. You're going to want to click on that, which will open up a new browser. You're going to maximize that browser, come over to My Badge Collection, then down to Web 2.0 Badges. There you'll click on Dipity Badge, and then you'll find the link to the timeline that I would like for you to review prior to coming to class on Monday. Once you have opened up Dipity, there you'll find many events I have created between the United States and Cuba. There are a few that I've wanted to highlight and talk about specifically. The first one is going to be the Spanish-American War. Here you'll actually find a video. Now, to access this video, it's pretty simple. You're just going to click the play button, and it'll go ahead and play the video, and then you'll be able to click out and go on to review the next event.